Thank you so much, Lauren and Erica, for joining in today. Really appreciate you taking the time out in such short notice as well. This is our August Security Summit event, and I think what we're going to focus today is mainly around the in-center solutioning and also look at the overall solution when you're giving assessments or certifications with proctoring, right? If you don't mind, if you could introduce yourselves. Erica, we'll start with you. If you could just tell us a bit more about you and the organization.
Sure. Thank you for having me today. I'm Erica Brown. I'm the Director of Certification for ASIS International, where we certify security management professionals around the world. We have over 34,000 members globally, and we have about 13,000 credentials that have been granted. We have 4 certifications for those credentials, and we are ISO IEC 17024 certified.
Okay, thank you so much, Erica. Lauren, if you could tell us a bit more about yourself and your organization.
Yes, of course. Also, thank you for having me. I'm Laurent Delare, the head of customer success at Televic Assessment Queue. We build a digital exam platform for high-scale, high-stakes exams. So we take all sorts of government exams or corporate exams, compliance exams. So it's in all this kind of directions that we are. So I think that's the main piece of it. We do both in-center and remotely proctored exams for this.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lauren. I think what you spoke about the in-center, and that's something we wanted to start off with. And so when you do your in-center, I think one of the first things that we hear from all of our customers is the entry point, right? How do you want to automate the check-in? Because there is a rigorous process in most centers in how you validate that it's the candidate who's registered is coming in. So if you could talk something about how you handle that today and also hear Erica's point of view on that.
Sure. So we do, like Lauren said, we currently offer both in test center and remote proctoring options. For our test center candidates, they do arrive. They're required to show a government issued ID that includes their photograph and signature. That is, verified against their application information that they had submitted to us. We are pretty strict on the matching of the name to the ID. Which can be actually create some complications in some parts of the world where government issued IDs are different. So we do have to work with our testing provider to navigate those global differences for different parts of the world. For our remote candidates, it's a very similar requirement where they have to have a photograph taken of their ID, a photograph of themselves, and then the matching of that same information. For our in-person folks, they are also wanted and, had their physical person checked before they enter the testing room. That's pretty thorough. I think it's kind of standard for most test centers, but I do feel like it's a pretty good, thorough check of the person. And then for remote proctor candidates, it's a similar process where they have to show the proctor behind their ears, any jewelry, any pull out their pockets, all of those things. And then the 360-degree check of their room, under their desk, under their chair, all of those things are checked. So fairly thorough, but not perfect, as we probably all know about, particularly the remote proctored center areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think for our customers, it's mostly the same, right? So if you have an in-test center exam, there's mostly identity verification with a government ID, for example, and then after these have been verified, to be fair, it's mostly human verified. I think that's still the most reliable at this point, and yeah, people don't want to take any risks on this front, of course. So it's mostly human verified, and then once these are verified, they are admitted into a next room or a next place, so that they can no longer be swapping with someone else. And then from that point on, they can proceed to the exam center, I guess. So yeah, it's very, very similar indeed.
And from an automation perspective, do you see scope there? Do both of you in your respective domains see the scope that automation can help scale this up? Because you're going to have some of your certifications may have a large, or centers may have large volume of people coming in, right? Or candidates walking in. So at that point, does automation actually help there to, speed up things so that the entire experience for the candidate is also good and you're hitting the accuracy that you need, like the stringent confirmation. So do you think automation is going to help over them?
It will be difficult, I think, to have a fully automated process, like 100%. I think that's tricky in some ways. Being half of a twin myself, I think that's always going to be a way to cheat on these things. Not that I've ever done it, to be clear. But I think you can win some efficiency with your process around it. I think you can make sure inscriptions and you have a smooth process at the site itself, for example. But I do think a real human pair of eyes to just check the ID, check the person in front of you is still somewhat recommended, because we do know that face recognition's algorithms are still sometimes slipping up, and again, depending on the stakes of the exam, that may or may not be tolerable, but I think for most of our customers that's not tolerable. So
Understood.
So I would agree with that. And I think particularly for a program where you may only have one exam and that's one touch point with that individual, having a human comparing the ID to the person's face makes a lot of sense and is probably more secure. If you had a program that had multiple exams where you have the same candidate in theory coming back for repetitive tests, perhaps something more automated could work because you have multiple points of verification and data points. But in a single exam or a very limited number of exams, I think the human review of them makes more sense and is more secure.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I was while you were narrating that, I was thinking, when we had COVID, the airport security, the way they did check-in changed, right? And earlier it was a lot a human in the loop, where someone is verifying when you enter the airport with your ID and all of that. That switched to machines, where the cameras started capturing your face. There was a face camera. There's face recognition happening that was matching with your ID, which you had to upload before you came to the airport. The one thing I noticed there was that the queue started moving faster because of that, right? So there is still a human check that's happening, but it's also with the automations. I saw the queues were much, much faster than what we were used to before. They were moving in time. And I do agree that we do see some inconsistencies with the algorithms, but the tech is getting there. But yeah, you're right that keeping that final check with a person is always the safest way, and it kind of ensures that everything is validated before they get in.
Yeah, and I think it's also what you mentioned. If you can build a process around it and some hardware around it, like you have in the airport, where indeed people are in queues and they have a lot of cameras scanning their face, but still a human is approving it, I think that could be theoretically an improvement of that process. If it's worth the cost or not probably depends on what kind of center and how many exams you're running in a year, but because it sounds quite expensive, but yeah, that could be a nice improvement. But it's only one small aspect of your whole test center, so it might not be worth it. But yeah, in theory, I think yes.
And do you all get feedback from candidates? Because and what I'm quoting as an example is when we do room scans or ID checks in remote proctoring, right? There are a lot of students or candidates who question why is the check so stringent, right? Some of them do get frustrated with the stringency of the check. So do you see that feedback coming in centers as well?
I have not heard that type of feedback for test centers. We get similar feedback for remote proctoring, but test centers, I've not really heard any candidate feedback that it takes too long or it's too invasive or anything. But again, I feel like it's pretty standard across test centers, so maybe that's just their expectation as they go into the buildings.
Yeah, and I think it's also maybe in a test center, it's maybe a bit more polished, whereas candidates are often not as used to having to struggle with the tech sometimes themselves, where they have no one to fall back to. Whereas as they're in a test center, there is probably someone to help if they're struggling with some technology, which probably adds to the frustration sometimes. But that being said, I think with a good proctoring solution, we do have a lot of customers working smoothly, so that it's possible. But I do think, frustration is a little bit more likely with a remote proctored solution.
Actually, I did just think of something. If you perhaps that friction point for whether it's in person or remote is if somebody takes an unscheduled break where their timer is still going. And if now I, go to use the restroom or whatever, and then I come back and I have to wait in line to be allowed, be checked again and then back to my desk, I could see that being if that could be more automated and still secure, could reduce some friction for candidates who are anxious about the timer still running.
Yeah, that's true, Erica. I think those are, like what Lauren said, processes that we can work on and improve with technology to get that edge out. I think it's the same. So when a candidate walks in to a center, and let's say you want to use digital monitoring, which is like you put secure browsers in the systems or you have flags, then you have the invigilators who are walking around the room. With technology, if you're able to give them better notifications, where I think one of the things we tried some time back was on an iPad, give like an admin dashboard, so the invigilator could see what's happening or notifications popping up from any of the desks. So if the candidates were trying to look around, or the camera captures facial movements, they would get notified, and then they knew who to go to and check whether something was going wrong. So those are, improvements that we can make to the process, I think, with technology. But apart from that, are there pain points that you'll see within center during the monitoring or getting the results that you think, should be improved with proctoring solutions?
I think we always try to bring forward the vision that security of your exam is not based on technology alone. It's not based, so it's based on a lot of things combined. So as long as you can have a couple of measures that complement each other as much as possible, honestly, I think you're doing great. And for us, I think we always try to see it as working on prevention of fraud, obviously working on detection of fraud, because you wouldn't be honest if you said you could prevent everything. There's always a way to cheat, sadly enough.
Yes.
And then I think the one that's maybe so obvious that it's often forgotten is just awareness with your candidates on, and clarity on, okay, if you cheat, this is what's going to happen, and just repeating that endlessly so that they have the awareness of the consequences of their actions is a statistically proven method, honestly, to reduce cheating. But we do see a lot of customers not playing this card enough. And then
Very interesting.
so I think often the more easy methods are sometimes being forgotten. Although of course you do need a lockdown browser ideally, and good invigilators, well-trained invigilators. Also that's something quite valuable if they all have the same standards and being rigorously trained on this. And they are reporting well, etc., etc. So, but on technology front, if you have a good lockdown browser and if you have good scanning of your candidates, as Erica already mentioned, a rigorous process where you check your candidates if they don't bring any technology in the center, etc., then you're doing already quite well, I would think.
Mm.
And I think, as you noted, Ashwin, again, if there is some additional help through the tablet and some monitoring digitally that can check if somebody's something up their sleeve that didn't get caught, those types of things to flag for the invigilator who may be out checking somebody else in and may not have seen that particular behavior on a screen. I think that is where the AI and the digital oversight can be really helpful to assist when there's humans can only see so much, especially when there's multiple roles that they have to play in a test center. So I know every delivery vendor has different ways that they do that, but it is definitely a nice addition to our toolbox for our security programs and test centers that is available now compared to years past.
True. Yeah, I think with AI, that's what we've seen our proctoring product evolve over the years, and with the advent of AI coming in, there are a lot more human gestures that you can now flag. Like if there's constant movement of the eyes, you can now flag that, because that those are suspicious to nature, that someone's trying to do something. So if you see it for a longer period of time, then it can be flagged, and you just need to like invigilators can just have a look that It's not someone nervous and looking around and someone actually trying to cheat, right? That's where the human in the loop comes in and makes that decision, which is the right decision to make. Um, from a center perspective, how do you ensure that your centers are operating at the same consistency? Because you're going to have centers across the globe, right? But how do you ensure that the standard is maintained across? How do you handle the partners that manage these centers?
So we have a single point of contact. We have one vendor that we work with for all of our test center channel. So that, we have strict protocols in place in our contracts with them. And we also do, for us, it's mostly domestically, but we do secret shop so that we can go and check how things are being handled. So we can at least try to get a fairly consistent candidate experience. But you're right. When you have test centers globally, you can't shop them all. And often your candidate experience is dependent on who the proctor might be that day, which is, that's the hard part about humans is we are not always consistent. So we work very hard to have all of our policies and procedures documented. As we secret shop, we request additional training if we do see inconsistencies, not just with the center that was being shopped, but also how are we ensuring that that's being, especially if we have a policy update, being shared across the full channel network. But it does take effort. You can't just assume that all of your policies are being distributed and implemented appropriately. So it is definitely something we work with very regularly with our partner.
Yeah, we
What-
don't. We see the same things with our customers, and I think it is quite challenging. Especially we have some customers doing global operations, and then even simple things as keeping hardware aligned, for example, and software version of some tools to make sure that the candidate experience is similar is months of work. So yeah, good communication I think is key. And then as Erica mentioned, auditing these test centers from time to time, for example. Yeah, that does the work.
So that is a complicated process, right? With the number of centers, auditing all of them. I think getting that consistency there is a lot of scope of improvement from what I see over there, which can make things easier if there's way to, bring that consistency across all the centers. Are there anything else that you think are challenges with that, or in the whole incentive process which you all follow? Are there key areas which you think, technology can help improve?
I think what'll be interesting is how the test centers continue to improve their process for the check-in process and it being more thorough as candidates have more wearable technology that
Yes.
if they're working with somebody outside of the space, maybe it isn't caught in the check-in, but then turns on somehow, once they're in the room, how are vendors going to continue scanning for digital signals that, turn on later? I think that that's the part that is still a great unknown for any of the testing vendors because the hidden technology is changing and growing and adapting so quickly that things that we wouldn't be suspecting right now are probably happening and we just haven't
Yes.
found a way to detect them. So I think that's something that I know organizations are working on, but I don't think that it's where it needs to be feel like we're actually staying on top of that challenge.
Yeah, and I think the hardest part is also if you take some measures, it's hard to know if they're working or not because you can't know who you're not catching. So I think that is indeed the toughest challenge right now.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's very true, right? With the way tech is changing, detection of tech becomes difficult. You need to have better detectors, right? I think simple things like spectacles, for example, having camera, right? And now you also have specs which comes with audio in them. So you can live stream and you can receive audio, which wasn't there just a few years back, right? So it's difficult to get those checked. Smartwatches, there's so many gadgets that's come out that we see candidates who are genuinely trying to cheat use them very effectively. Yeah.
Yes, and also AI models being more and more offline available, right? So they won't even need
Right.
internet access to get these answers.
Exactly.
So that's definitely tough.
Yes. And from a solution perspective, right? You both have experience remote and in center, right? And there's always a debate between in center and remote. We've seen a lot of those debates. I wanted to hear your thoughts around remote and in center.
Mm, it's a difficult time to predict anything, so but I think remote is having its word cut out for itself. I'm not saying it's going to disappear or anything like that. I'm not going to make any drastic statements like this, but um, we do see a lot of techniques now coming up in remote proctoring that seem quite challenging to catch, and the fact that we've seen them is good news, but still it's going very quickly, and I think there lies the challenge also, because we need to play this cat and mouse game as quickly as the other side is doing it.
Mm.
When we look at our channel, we look at two things. One is the candidate experience, and two is our security. I'm not saying which one's in which order because it depends on the day and what's going on. But what we've found is our remote proctoring appointments, we go from having, thousands of test centers that are under contract and have ways that are tested and verified, and a reasonably similar experience for our candidates. With remote proctoring, we've got thousands of independent test centers, so to speak, that we have no control over the hardware, the environment, or anything. And we do see a lot more challenges and requests for review of exam events, and different things that come through that are a staff lift to confirm what happened, what didn't happen, where is the candidate responsible for a retest fee versus a free retest because it wasn't their fault. That inconsistency is a big challenge for both the candidates and the exam body to make sure that it's still a consistent experience when you're taking your exams. And that is a big challenge. On the security front, ASIS has been very open. We have had 3 of our 4 exams found online in the last couple of years. For that reason, as security management professionals, we are risk averse. Effective September 1st, we are actually pulling back significantly our access to remote proctoring. Our candidates will be directed to test centers moving forward unless they have a medical need for a remote proctored exam. The risk for remote proctoring, as we've seen in our program, has been too great in the last few years. And with the current state of things, it's best for our program to pull back. I know there's a lot of organizations that, including ASIS, that added remote proctoring during COVID. It was a necessity for a while, but we're finding that the challenges are outweighing the benefits at this point, which is hard. We are a global population. We have a lot of candidates who are not near a test center, which is going to create different challenges for our population. But we need to protect the brand and integrity of our exams. And at least as the current state of remote proctoring is, we are most comfortable with protecting the brand, which means that we are going to go back to test centers.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah, and I think more organizations will follow decisions like this, and it's probably either that or heavily investing in item banking, for example, and making sure that you keep on having fresh content ready so you can support these remote exams. And this might very well be worth it. We have a customer who deliberately stepped back from exam center because to be fair, they're also costly to run. So you can also invest
Yeah.
this money in item banking, but it's a trade-off every organization will have to make on their own. But I do agree that a lot of organizations will probably follow this trend.
Yeah. Thanks, Lauren. I was actually coming back to around the point around the costs of running in center versus remote, right? It's it's also an additional cost, like Erica said, for students who are candidates who don't stay near test centers. They need to plan much more in advance. Whereas when you do remote, it kind of gives them that edge of taking it from their home. They both have their ups and downs in terms of when it comes to costs, right? It's where you trade off that. But with the I think what Erica spoke about on the content getting leaked online, I think that's the big thing that everyone's fighting today, right? Because once that goes online, then your question banks need to change. If you're not able to track down which test it went for, then it's assumed that so many students would have had access to that before they came in, before the leak happened, right? So those are some of the challenges which I think we see. We from Talbio's perspective, we try controlling that by using the lockdown browser, because it kind of brings the system completely in a lockdown state and does not allow background applications to run, which can actually record the screens silently. But there are always ways to overcome that by the environment, right? So you could put in cameras, for example, in the room and start recording screen, because that's what a lot of organizations that we work with, we kind of tap into that, and we see that they sell the questions, right? That's they help the students take up these certifications by getting access to these questions. So there is always that risk, and how you combat that with technologies, but where we are heading, where we see that you invest in certain technologies to get that security and try and lock down the system. The other thing is when we do room scans for remote proctoring, right? How thorough you make those scans, that becomes critical. But then there is a trade-off with the candidate experience. There, a lot of candidates are not going to be comfortable showing their entire room, or they do have some of those blockers which will have to come through. Some
We've
of
also,
Yeah,
oh,
go ahead.
excuse
Sorry.
me. We've also had challenges with proxy testers in our for our remote candidates, which I don't think we're alone in that. You can go online anytime and see organizations are saying, we'll take your test for you. You don't pay us until you've passed, and that type of thing. We actually tried one out, and not staff, but somebody in our stakeholder population. We said, let's work with this and see how does it really work. And unfortunately, it did. Um, so proxy testing is also a challenge that we have to be aware of and know it does work, and there are ways to do that. And again, leaning into our decision to go back to test centers was one of the data points we used, because we know the proxy testing worked. And not to say somebody, a twin, as Laurent mentioned earlier, couldn't do that same thing in a test center. It is a harder challenge. There's a lot more effort that would have to go into fake IDs and all of those things, which again, I know isn't impossible, but it's certainly harder to do it for an in-person event than a remote test. So
Yeah, and also I think if you're bound to a physical location, it already helps tighten it, because we do see a lot of these organizations working from the other side of the world, let's say. So that makes it harder if you're definitely having a domestic exam, for example, for these kind of operations.
Yes. Yeah, it definitely limits the ability or the effort to cheat becomes harder if you go to an in-center. I think that's definitely an advantage there. And I think you add that with some, automated monitoring tools within the systems, it makes it even more efficient when you look at some of the in-center, security breaches that can happen. Curbing it becomes easier. And it's also easy to track back if there are any leaks to where it happened. From a proctoring solution overall, and Lauren, you wanted to speak about proctoring solution. You want to give us some thoughts that you had?
I think most has been said. I think we are definitely coming up at very challenging times for proctoring solutions, and it will depend a lot on which kind of certifications you're doing and which kind of audience and how many times per year you organize an exam, etc., etc. But there are definitely some heavy challenges coming up, and I'm curious to see how technology will enable also us as builders of exam platforms and proctoring solutions, for example, to catch up with this, because we do see, for example, browsers launching all sorts of new AI features, but not always including the possibility to, for example, detect or block usage of those things. So, for example, these kind of things
Yes.
are going to be very important. And at this point not really a way to say how this will evolve. For example, I think beginning of 2026, the state of AI was so much different than it is now, and this pace will not slow down. So, so yeah, it's going to be a challenging time, and I do feel like an in-center experience will always evolve a little slower because you do need hardware then, or you need to bring in extra hardware. The checks are in person. It's somehow easier. It's still easier to check someone in person. So, so yeah, interesting times ahead. But we're of course very curious to see what happens, and we will keep working on solutions to make remote exams successful, because there will always be cases where remote is the only answer as well. So we definitely don't want to abandon them at all even.
Yeah.
I would love to get back to the point of feeling more comfortable and that the risk has been managed. I won't say gone, but managed to get back to offering remote to our candidates. And I do think that, the decision between an in-person test center and remote is only one part of our security solution. So, as Ashwin said earlier, what does your item bank look like? What are your other policies and procedures about form turnover, item use, how often are things used? There's a lot of things we can do to manage our security protocols, and that is also being impacted by technology and AI in particular at this point. So I think the decision between in-person and remote is one part, but we have to think about it holistically so that we're not missing things and have something in our blinders that we didn't realize we need to be addressing. So security is a daily conversation, and how we're addressing different things it's so much more than just the actual test, the exam event experience.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. One thing, for example, we've also been thinking about is, yeah, what if you allow AI, for example, and what does that do? Because keeping it out will be hard, and it will stay hard. So, what if you set a certain baseline for exam AI assisted, and then you try to work from that? But these are definitely things these are now very, very, very early days. But I think new testing concepts will probably even emerge to handle these kind of challenges. If you have to beat a certain AI bench line rather than just pass your test, for example, to just prove that you are doing the work, or at least adding value yourself. But yeah, it will take time. It will take quite a bit of time, and depending again on the stakes of the exam, people will not just embrace new technology or a new testing framework as easily. So yeah.
That's a very interesting thought, Lauren, because today AI is getting used at every workplace. It's almost used everywhere now, right? So why leave it out when you're testing? Rather use it and see what's the capability that a person can give with AI, right? I think that requires a complete different framework of testing, like you said. But it's a very
Yes,
interesting.
and a huge mentality shift as well, I think, from how you design your questions, what kind of point of view do you use there, what do you actually want to test. It's radically different, and so I think that's also another way to tackle this challenge, but also a very interesting one.
Yeah, I think that we're going to see a large shift in testing for knowledge that we do now, when knowledge is so accessible through all of the AI tools, to judgment and competency, and how we are testing those is going to have to be a different model than what we see right now when we're testing knowledge. And multiple choice works fine for that, but when we're looking at judgment, and how are you going to know when AI is wrong, and how does it apply in this very specific nuanced situation, especially in a very high stakes profession? We don't want our doctors having to look up the answer through AI when it's a surgery or something. So how are we getting beyond what's in the books to what's actually being applied is going to shift how we look at credentialing in the future.
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, there's so many changes happening, right? And it's very rapid. So I think that's what is the added challenge to solving, and getting that stability, consistency across as we work through this phase. Um, yeah, those are the topics I had. Is there anything that you have in mind? Anything from a solution perspective, or let me put this as an ask list that I think we should do this to improve.
I think for now, the only thing you can do is try to stay on top on what's being done and investigate as soon as and as quickly as possible how we can combat these things, and then try to think of innovative ways to scan technologies being used, etc. But it's going to be evolving so quickly that I don't think there's a magic bullet right now to develop.
Yeah. I think all credentialing bodies should have policies, as Laurent mentioned earlier, about what happens if
Mhm.
you are found to have, taken the content, posted the content, whatever it might be. So I think having your policies and procedures in place so you can act when needed is super important. Having a monitoring program so that you can know, is our content out there? It likely is, and you just haven't found it yet. AI has made the gathering of content so much more
Yes.
inexpensive and profitable for the organizations that want to sell it. And if you don't think you have a problem, you probably just aren't looking, because it's likely that
Yeah.
somebody out there is trying to sell your content. So if somebody reports, that they've seen your content online, you need to look and see, is it actually ours? It may not be. We've had that situation as well, but we've had it reported and we found it was ours. And having our policies and procedures there so we knew what to do, how to do it, and our timeline was critical to managing the content replacement and getting it back up for our candidates as soon as possible. But it is effort, it is staff time, it is having that governance in place is really going to make you more efficient at managing those challenges. And again, if your credential is worth something in the world, somebody is probably trying to steal it and sell it.
Yes.
Yeah, and also here I think being proactive about it, like don't wait until you find your content on the street, just already invest in making more content. It's also a solid way to just combat any kind of fraud, not only AI fraud. And you can also research in using AI to your advantage here to create this content faster. Of course, will still need to be revised by experts, etc., but it will save you some time as well. So yeah, fight with the same weapons.
Yeah. We see that then, Erica, we do a lot of this like proactive searching of content online, leaks and channels, shopping with bodies, organizations that we see are providing, the ability for candidates to take tests on their behalf. And over the past few years, the frequency at which we are able to catch the content online has definitely increased. There is a marked increase that you can see, right? So it comes in different forms, different types, how it gets leaked, but it's definitely there. And then, handling that is what Lauren's speaking about, right? How, if you've caught it, now how do I make the change? If I already have a question bank ready, then the switch is very simple for me. So that, I think the other thing is what you both mentioned, we need to have more conversations around security in larger forums and groups, because there's so many different perspectives to it. Bringing it all together just adds more value. Like just this conversation today was interesting for me to go back and look at some of the things that we are performing in our operations, right? It's a lot of insight that comes through these conversations.
I agree.
Yeah, I love
Well,
learning from other organizations and how they are managing these. I have regular meetups with folks in the credentialing world because we're all facing similar challenges, but how our organizations are addressing them, being proactive or reactive. To your point, Ashwin, we can all learn from each other. None of
yeah,
us are going to get it right, and we're all going to continue to find holes, but we can learn so we can maybe get ahead of some things in our own organization. We don't all have
yes,
to invent the wheel, so to speak.
definitely, definitely, yes. Okay, I think we're just about over the time. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing such wonderful insights. It's always a privilege to host these sessions for me. There's so much of learning that comes through it. So really appreciate the time both of you have taken today.
Thanks
You're
for having
welcome.
me.
Thank you.
Right. You have a good rest of the day. Bye.